Hey.
Alright, so that Suns-Clippers game last night was absolute mayhem. Obviously, there was the last, 3 minutes of the game were reportedly, 33 minutes long in real time or something like that, which is absolutely absurd and crazy and should never happen in an NBA game, but I still enjoyed it all the same. So far across these first two games, the ball movement and defensive rotations and defense in general have just been ridiculous for both teams, especially the Clippers. Without Kawhi, they have had just about zero offense to go their way, zero offensive firepower at that. Paul George has been struggling mightily. No one else has really been stepping up huge for them. Reggie Jackson's had a few good games. But I mean, outside of that, this offense is struggling and their defense has been stepping up for them big time. Yet somehow in the game last night, whenever Phoenix went on a quick little run to get a 8 or 10 point lead, somehow the Clippers would just, I don't even feel like they were running plays out there. It felt like it was just a lot of ISO ball that led to some mayhem, or at least they were attacking in the fast break and were getting some open opportunities there. But they somehow continued to just cut the lead every single time, and I mean, it was all the ingredients for a great playoff game. One thing that I think is very important to note though is that this Clippers team has been playing every other night since their first playoff game back against the Mavericks in round 1, because if you remember, that series went 7, and then they immediately went to their series against the Jazz, and that one went 6, and since Phoenix has swept the Nuggets, they immediately went into this current series with the Phoenix Suns. And this is important because obviously Kawhi's hurting out, Marcus Morris is playing banged up right now. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bunch of other players that are just playing through some more minor injuries, but fatigue has to set in at some point, especially since these are all playoff intensity games that they're playing. I don't want to be a cop-out or make a cop-out for Paul George last night, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of his misses and just bad shooting in general has been due to him being tired, especially those free throws at the end of the game, which I'll probably be touching on a little bit later. But to quickly hit on some points for the Suns, I was very impressed with Cam Johnson. He made a ton of high-impact plays, hit a few big threes, had some big offensive rebounds throughout the game, and overall has just been a very, very reliable piece off the bench. Just exactly what the Suns want him to be. He has been that. And again, just a great wing guy to come off the bench and sub in for both Jay Crowder and Mikal Bridges, who have both also been playing great in the series. And DeAndre Ayton continues to dominate. He's fully earning the nickname Dominatin'. I mean, going into these playoffs, it was unsure the type of player that DeAndre Ayton really was in this league. He'd have stretches where he would be a really good player, and he'd have stretches where he'd be a really bad player, and just not be aggressive and all that good stuff. But so far in these playoffs, we have seen that DeAndre Ayton is going to be a very, very valuable piece for the Suns team. He continues to be the X factor that really is the deciding factor in how well the Suns team plays, and against this Clippers team that wants to run small ball, and he's completely negated it, and that has been a big key thing in the series is DeAndre Ayton forcing the Clippers to play outside their comfort zone. And then for the Clippers, one kind of minor thing I just wanted to throw out there is it seems like they've been trying to use Boogie Cousins as the primary scorer off the bench whenever Paul George is off the court, and they run their offense through him. They try to get it to him in the post, and it just hasn't been working. I love Boogie. He used to be a very dominant player, but current day Boogie just is not going to get it done in the Western Conference Finals. So one change I'd love to see is to see some more Luke Kennard minutes. I know he finished the game. They started to make that transition in the second half. But honestly, I think just running like floppies and pin downs for Luke Kennard will open up way more driving lanes and just more offense in general for the Clippers than posting up Boogie Cousins will ever do. And then Pat Bev, Pat Bev continues to trick y'all, man. Russell Westbrook, we owe Russell Westbrook flowers just for that statement itself. I don't even care about all the triple doubles and stats he's accomplished over his entire career. Russell Westbrook should go into the Hall of Fame just for that one quote by himself, because it's just so true. And I don't want to knock Pat Bev. He's a competitor. He is a good hustle player in the NBA. Is he a little bit overrated at some points? Yes. Is he a nuisance at some points? Yes, because he has been doing a great job chasing Devin Booker around screens, contesting his shots, making sure to bother Devin Booker as much as possible. And we saw that last night. Devin Booker did not have a great game shooting-wise, still playmaking and played some pretty good defense, but again, he was not the same Devin Booker that we saw in Game 1, and it seemed like Pat Bev might have finally figured something out in that matchup. But as for the late game stuff, where he drew the offensive foul on Devin Booker when he exaggerated a hit to the face, or the out-of-bounds play where he knocked it loose from Booker and made the refs review it, and we actually saw that it barely was off Booker last, and that call would never be made over the first 46 minutes of an NBA game, but since they had the review and it was technically off Devin Booker, it was Clippers ball, and that's the stuff where Pat Bev just gets annoying. But I mean, I guess you have to respect him as a player to some extent, but that late game stuff that he always pulls is just, it's such a nuisance. And I also feel like I have to talk about the end of this game at least a little bit. I mentioned how I'd come back to the PG free throws because PG had an absolutely atrocious game shooting wise, had a lot of defensive lapses, then out of nowhere just finally hits a 3 late in the fourth, follows that up with the transition layup and the huge pull-up midi to put his team up on 2 separate occasions, and then has a chance to potentially put the game on ice. Clippers are up 1, he gets fouled with like 10 seconds left, goes to the foul line, and misses 2 free throws that will probably haunt him for quite a long time. Like, the basketball gods just have some sort of vendetta against Paul George at this point because he really can't have anything nice in any game whatsoever. And then you follow that up with the DeAndre Ayton alley-oop with 0.9 seconds left. And like, I understand that obviously Devin Booker is the player that you're supposed to be worried about. 0.9 seconds is plenty of time to get a mid-range shot up, so you want to try and play everyone equally. But at the same time, if you're Ivica Zubac, I just feel like you should probably be closer to the paint, or at least heavily playing DeAndre Ayton towards the paint. And if you're Boogie Cousins guarding the inbounds pass, why are you not standing between Jay Crowder and the basket? That made 0 sense to me. And yeah, the Clippers are going to Clipper at some point, and it just so happened that it took them to Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals, in a game that they really needed to win if they want to have a chance in the series, but the Clippers turned into the Flippers yet again. But now we're going to rotate over to the main point of this video, and that is Cam Payne. Cam Payne really played well in all aspects of the game. He's been filling in almost perfectly for Chris Paul, had a career-high 29 points for both regular season and playoffs, also added 9 assists with 0 turnovers, and again, this is just pretty much everything you can ask for out of your bench point guard. So let's check out some of my favorite plays of his from last night's game. Starting on defense, he had a ton of high-impact plays, whether it was getting steals on opposing star players like Paul George, or getting blocks in transition to shut down some easy fast break points. He also just had some great rotations and played good defense in general. For example, on this play here, you can see that when PG is driving, Cam Payne helps off his man at the nail and helps force a turnover. Even if PG did kind of just trip on himself a little bit, the added extra help from Cam Payne showing on the drive just made it so that Paul George, tripped, even if it was his own fault, leads to a turnover. Cam Payne has even done a great job helping fill Chris Paul's playmaking shoes. Obviously, he is the point guard. Chris Paul has been one of the best playmakers to ever grace the NBA, but apparently Suns fans are coming up with a new nickname for Cam Payne, and he is now being labeled Point Jesus, which is pretty cool. But anyway, the playmaking that he had last night was pretty cool as well. Early on in the game, after a make, he pushes it out and then finds Devin Booker cutting to the basket on a great pass that ends up leading to a foul. Then here on this next play, Paul George, pretty good defender still, but just plays a bit too tight on Cam Payne. And here's the burstiness of Cam Payne that works so well. Just bursts right by Paul George, gets to the paint, forces Ivica Zubac to come and help, and then makes a live dribble one-handed lefty pass over to DeAndre Ayton for the very easy layup. And then opening in the fourth quarter, we see on the baseline Luke Kennard and Nick Batum try to get a switch off. Sarge does a great job at sealing on the switch to make sure he's on the inside of Batum, Cam Payne realizes this and just lofts a perfect pass for the very easy Sarge finish. And even when it comes to scoring the ball, Cam Payne stepped up big time. As I already mentioned, he had the 29 points, which was a career high for both regular season and postseason, and he did it in a variety of ways. Here you can see him working off ball as a catch and shoot threat, and he actually shot a very high percentage. He was over 40% from 3 on the regular season, so not even really a huge surprise that he was hitting these. Even throughout the rest of the game, Cam Payne was relentlessly attacking the rim, both in pick and roll and just off drives in general, and he's so bursty and quick as a guard that once he has you on his hip or gets a step on you, it's pretty much game over, as you can see from a lot of these finishes here. First, he gets it in transition and then just blows right by Reggie Jackson and then finishes with the nice reverse layup. Or here, he inbounds to Sarge, gets the handoff and immediately reverses for a screen. Already has Batum on his hip, DeMarcus Cousins is in drop and not going to affect any shot he puts up, and he finishes with the very easy floater. And then on these other two examples, both Marcus Morris and Paul George get put on his hip, as I've said, and then he just floats to the rim for the very easy layups. But it wasn't all just straightforward layups for Cam Payne. He even mixed in a few pretty good finishes as well. On this play here, he receives a screen from DeAndre Ayton, sees that Reggie Jackson goes under, so he has Ayton rescreen on the other side. He then drives by and then goes into the floater as Zubac is in drop and doesn't get to the shot in time. And then a very similar play here, gets the screen from Ayton, Reggie Jackson goes over, Zubac is in drop, but Jackson actually does a better job at sticking with him until Cam Payne puts the stops on him and then hits the step back between the legs for the midi jumper. And then maybe his craziest score of the night, again off a screen from DeAndre Ayton, gets to the paint, puts Paul George in jail for a second, throws up the pump fake, and then goes up and under for the little scoop lay-in, and that one had Jeff Van Gundy absolutely bewildered, and it was a great play. But most importantly, even in crunch time, he fits perfectly into what Phoenix wants to do late in the game. You'll see on both of these plays that they have both Jay Crowder and Mikal Bridges in the corners, as Cam Payne, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton pretty much run a three-man game in the middle of the court. And Phoenix is known for using a play called Spain pick and roll. And if you don't know what it is, a brief explanation of it is it's a normal pick and roll, but you add a third screener in the paint area who screens the big man's guy, defender, as the big man sets a screen for the person with the ball. And basically, it just adds a whole nother level of confusion for the defense when it comes to switching and who to guard. And Cam Payne, again, he fits so perfectly into this, as you will see on these plays. On this one here, a little bit earlier in the fourth, you see Sarge come up, set the screen, and then Booker sets another screen on Zubac as he's in the paint, which just allows Cam Payne to float dribble as deep as he can into the paint, and then he gets to the point where he can just use his burstiness to go right up to the rim on Patrick Beverley, who at that point isn't going to do anything to stop him. And then this one in the final 2 minutes, you can actually see Devin Booker telling DeAndre Ayton to go set the screen to set up the Spain pick and roll. And even though Booker doesn't quite hit Zubac on this one, Cam Payne had enough separation that it was just him and Reggie Jackson as he was driving to the rim. And Reggie Jackson is not going to stop Cam Payne, especially after he's already scored 27 points. And it's just another very easy finish for Cam Payne. So as we are preparing and heading into Game 3 on Thursday, it's been reported that CP3 is most likely on his way back to the lineup, and that basically means that Cam Payne will go back to his six-man role off the bench. But even with that being said, Cam Payne remains probably the fourth best player on this team currently in the playoffs, and he deserves a lot of credit for the success that the Suns have been having. Honestly, even just going back to their 8-0 trip to the NBA bubble last season, he's been amazing. He's also played a big role in the Suns' current winning streak. If you haven't noticed, and I don't blame you for it, the Suns are currently on a 9-game winning streak. Their last loss was to the Lakers in the first round, and again, they haven't lost in 9 games, yet for some reason, national NBA media just is seeming to gloss over this fact, even though it's only been done a handful of times, as the Phoenix Suns just continue to get disrespected by the media, and it's absurd because they are currently looking like one of, if not the best team remaining in these playoffs, and they deserve their flowers. They deserve a ton of credit. I hope to see them go far.